Righto, guys, it's Friday. It's time for another Tech Talk discussion today. We were going to bring up the topic of overlays, the good, the bad, the ugly. It's something I'm certainly interested in. I haven't heard a great deal about them or come across them a whole lot. So it would be nice to learn a few things. I guess I'll lead straight in with, when are we looking to use an overlay? What's the situation? Why do they exist? Where do they come about? Where do they come into the picture? Guys, what can you tell me?
I guess we'll talk about first what an overlay is and then get into when or why we use it. An overlay is basically it's a veneer product. So we've got an existing concrete substrate and we actually put a new floor covering over that. So it's a leveling compound that's been modified to be the finished product. Now, when I say finished product, it doesn't finish at the time that you've pumped it in or installed it. It then needs to be ground and polished afterwards. And it can either have aggregate in it or it can have no aggregate in it. And it's really, really good if you've got an existing premises and you don't have very good concrete to polish, or it's not very desirable, and you want to put in a custom mix. So we can go in at, normally gets poured at around about 15 or 16 millimeters and gets finished at around 12 millimeters, which is similar to your tiles, carpets, and that sort of stuff. So really, really attractive from that sense, because it's just so diverse.
So that's what I was going to ask. Is there a bit of a set thickness? I guess if you had uneven ground, there could be different thicknesses, because maybe that's why you're using it, to get a nice even ground and that sort of thing there. And aggregate and non-aggregate, would that be it? I mean, is there sort of, you're saying probably special mixes you can put in there as well, like pebble mixes and things like that? Am I right in saying that having an overlay scenario isn't going to help replace any steps in your grinding and polishing? So that would be a completely an additional thing to having a floor ground and polish up. Yeah.
Well, depending on the material that you're putting down, because all of the overlays on the market will have different compositions or how they're made up, and that in turn will transition onto your tooling, what tooling you're going to choose, because being as such thin surface area or thin materials, there's a lot of modifier in there, like plasticizers or fibers or whatever it is, to give the strength to that overlay to be able to, not just crack up on you. So the process is going to be different than your general slab.
How different? Why is it different? Come on, I want to know.
So we've got another 3 hours of discussion to answer those.
Okay, but there is that much a big degree of difference in what you might normally be looking to do. It can be quite a bit different, yeah.
There's so many differences depending on what material that you're using, and from the overlay binder. Particularly if you're buying the overlay binder and the aggregate separately, so it's not coming in a mix together. That changes everything, because the aggregates themselves are different in their character as far as working with your grinding tools and polishing tools. So I've got that to take into consideration, as we would with concrete. But then we've also got how the binder was produced and by whom. So that's different. And then if we go to the other extreme where we don't have any aggregate in it, that also makes it a lot more different, because the surface area is now filled with lots and lots of additives, polymers, and that sort of stuff. All the stuff that we know that we try to steer away from when doing a mechanical polished concrete, it's all in there in an overlay to make it stable. And why it's one of the reasons why it's so important for it to have this is what makes the overlays very, very different and challenging, compared to traditional concrete, is that we're talking about putting it down at 15, 16 millimeters of thickness. So over 100 square meters or something like that, we've actually got really, really massive ratio of surface area to mass, which means that this stuff actually wants to dry really, really quickly. And we already know that when concrete dries really quickly, we start to see cracking. Or if there's any type of shrinkage because it was overwatered, now it's starting to lose mass, it cracks. So when it comes to doing an overlay, we've got exactly the same things, but we've got such a high surface area, which makes it a really volatile product to work with. So in order to try and stabilize that, we start pushing a whole bunch of stuff in there to try and make it stable. But that's not normally compatible or conducive with our traditional mechanical polishing system. So if we're talking about doing a surface polish with this stuff, it's not going to be anywhere near as stable as if it has aggregate in there, helping to bulk out the chemical side of it and give it mass through aggregates. So the aggregates in the binder actually help contribute to the strength because of the uniformity and their of density. So that helps to give a lot of strength to it. Whereas if we've got all liquid going down, being the binder, we've got a much bigger task, and a lot more moisture is going to dissipate from that mix. So we're going to experience a lot more shrinkage. So from a manufacturing and design perspective, it's very, very challenging. And then from a finishing perspective, it's also very, very challenging again to make both of those worlds come together.
So as much as it's nice to have a good aesthetic, it's really something that's maybe a bit of a go-to to get you out of trouble a little bit. I mean, you can have it for aesthetic purposes, but it is such a difficult thing that you might not particularly go that way just to get an aesthetic look. You've really been backed into a corner to have to use an overlay, you think?
It can be by choice. A customer will like it because there's so much choice. But
and I get it, and that's what I mean. And you will be attracted to it for that, but you really want to just give it a second thought because it can be quite. If it's purely just from an aesthetic point of view, just be aware that you are toying with things a little bit.
Most of the choices we make are that's why I wanted to get Milan's input, okay? Because I know Milan's had a lot of experience in this space, and I don't necessarily want to scare anyone away. I want to give them the tools to ensure that this is successful, because this is a great product to be able to offer, and gives us so much more scope in this space. But Milan, give us some tools to give us some confidence and help us ensure success in being able to offer these types of finishes.
The product itself is not scary. The only time it becomes scary is just agreeing to put it down on a live job, and then you're scratching your head trying to figure out, one, how to lay it, or two, how to polish it. So I think we're going to go back to that old saying is sample the product. And if you don't find a space where you can sample the product, it might be at the manufacturer's warehouse or somewhere where you can spend time getting the right process in place for that product. And also, if the supplier can't help you with a process for polishing it and says, here, it's polishable, you go polish it, that to me is alarm bells. Anyway, but the product is not actually scary. I mean, depending on what product you're gonna use, some are more heavy cement concentrated, some are more modified. When I installed overlays, I had a particular product which I like to use because it was very similar to just polishing a slab. Some of them, issue is heat. So when we're using resins particularly, the resins tend to overheat and give us weird resin scratches. So if that's the case, you then introduce tempos or something like that, or the softer material to compensate that. So
that's what I wanted to ask you, Milan. Is there anything I'm going to go out and look for a particular overlay? Is there any sort of good or bad I should be looking out for between different suppliers of that? Or
look, good and bad, it's going to be down to personal choice as well. Okay. Some will close up a whole lot better, so nice tight surface, and you'll get a really nice polish. Some of them you can do your best polish or your best process, and they just won't close up just as good as a concrete slab. So it's important. I guess it's another product that you have to put in your range. If you're going to install overlays, make sure that you're comfortable with it. Make sure you can back the product. But the beauty about it when you do, hey, it's always going to be the same. It's not going to be different job to job, or there's no finger pointing at the concreter, because we know how much we love to do that, don't we?
No longer interested.
Well, that's a good point. I mean, it's something we so heavily talk about. One job to the next can be so different. So it's an interesting point you make, that once you have got that down pat, you've actually got that to look forward to when you move on to using it on another job. Yeah,
and for me, once I found that product, it was super easy. And you just get in a rhythm, you install it, you polish it. The process never changed. The metal bonds stayed the same, the resin stayed the same, everything was the same. So it was really easy to replicate. So don't fear them, just sample it.
So then what I'm hearing here, Milan, is that it's really, this is a great thing to get into because it'll expand your product offerings. And as you said, once you've got the system down pat, it's really consistent. So that means it's duplicatable and it's teachable, which is also fantastic. But it's got a bit of a high barrier to entry because there's a bit of education that's involved before you go out and sell and install. So bit of caution, get educated. A lot of the manufacturers actually do installation training. So I would certainly be encouraging people to go along to those and make sure that the product does what you're comfortable with delivering or selling as a product for your customer, and you are comfortable that you can actually replicate on site.
Oh, that's cool. I'm not scared anymore now. See, you've calmed me down a bit. So yeah, it could be something that if I really wanted to go for a particular look that I'm not going to get out of my existing floor, it's certainly an opportunity to get the look I want.
Yeah, great. They are
Cool.
a great thing.
Good one, guys. I know it's just a very quick touch on that subject. I'm sure there's a lot more to it, but obviously any comments and things down below are always welcome. And it was a good topic to discuss, guys. Thanks very much.
I could be talking about this for this 3 hours, but yeah, we'll keep it short.
We've done really well. We've done really well, Milan.
Going to go and polish off a beer now.
Our aggregates in that.
Just Skittles. Absolutely. All
That's
right, guys.
Hey, everyone have a really great weekend. We'll see you again next week.
Beauty.
See you next week. Have a good one.